A dog brought a millionaire and a simple girl together, but when she found out who he really was, it changed her life forever. The morning fog was thick as soup the day Bentley ran off. Logan Blake, bundled in a slate-gray wool coat, jogged along the damp sand, his boots imprinting wide, anxious strides. The retriever had vanished near the jetty, a flash of gold slipping past the rocks with the speed of instinct. "Bentley!" he called, sharp and strained, the Atlantic wind stealing half the sound from his throat. He hadn't lost anything in 5 years. Not since the night his brother's jeep wrapped around a pine tree outside Saratoga. Since then, Logan had run a fortress of boutique hotels with mechanical precision and emotional vacancy. But now, he was pacing the Maine shoreline, calling a dog's name like it was the last word in the world that mattered. Bentley had been the one thread back to feeling, rescued from a flooded shelter on the anniversary of Ethan's death. Since then, the dog had become his shadow. So when he disappeared around the tide-washed boulders, Logan's calm exterior cracked. And that's when he heard her laugh. A short distance up the beach, near a weather-beaten bench, a woman knelt in the grass, one hand outstretched toward a gleaming golden retriever who had decided to sit, quite proudly, on her foot. "You must be Logan," she said before he could speak, smiling like the sun had just broken through. "He's already invited himself over." Logan stared. The woman, girl, really, mid-20s at most, was in worn jeans, a fleece jacket with an embroidered paw print, and shoes thoroughly chewed at the edges. Her brown hair was pulled into a messy bun, tendrils blown loose by the sea breeze. She looked like someone who laughed often and cried easily, someone who kept band-aids in her car and remembered her neighbors' birthdays. And Bentley, traitorous as ever, was leaning into her side like he'd found an old friend. "I'm Emily," she added, standing. "I walk dogs for the local shelter. I guess Bentley's decided he wants to be one of them." That name again. Ethan's voice used to say it like a dare. "Emily's our trouble," he'd once told Logan during college spring break, pointing to a girl dancing barefoot by a bonfire. "They'll make you feel everything you're trying to forget." But this Emily didn't look like trouble. She looked like grace. Later that afternoon, Emily sat on the front porch of Logan's weathered shingle house, sipping hot cider from a chipped mug. Bentley rested his chin on her knee, sighing like he'd always lived there. "I can pay," Logan said, still not entirely sure why he'd invited her in, why the words had come out. "If you'd be willing to help out with him this week. I've got meetings I can't miss." Emily nodded. "I'm not in it for the money. People always say that right before they invoice you." She grinned. "Okay, fine. I'll accept payment in coffee. And maybe that blanket I saw on your couch, the one Bentley clearly thinks is his." Logan allowed the smallest curve of a smile. He hadn't meant to open the door. Not literally, not figuratively. But here was someone who hadn't Googled him, who hadn't asked about the chain of luxury hotels he owned, who hadn't mentioned Ethan. She just stepped over the unspoken grief between them and scratched behind Bentley's ears. That night, after she left, Logan stood by the window for a long time, watching the empty road where her car had disappeared. The town was quiet, the stars indifferent. He reached down, hand brushing Bentley's head. "She talks too much," he muttered. Bentley thumped his tail once, then rested it again. And outside the sea kept rolling, as it always did, carving away at stone with the slow, patient weight of time. The next morning brought a rare stillness to the coast. No wind, no tourists, no sound beyond the rhythmic hush of waves breaking gently against the rocks. Logan sat at the kitchen table, mug in hand, staring at a spreadsheet he wasn't reading. Bentley was already at the door before the knock came. Emily, punctual as promised, wore a rain jacket too thin for the weather and carried a leash with a handmade tag that read, "Bentley," in blocky, careful letters. She looked as though she hadn't quite planned to walk into someone's life, but did it anyway, without permission or apology. "I brought treats," she said, lifting a jar shaped like a dog bone. "Organic, wheat-free. Probably more nutritious than whatever you eat." Logan gestured her in with a nod. She stepped over the threshold like it was just another morning, like the air between them wasn't filled with something quiet and watchful. He usually won't let strangers near his leash. Logan said. Guess I'm not a stranger anymore. They walked the short trail in silence for a time, the kind that settled comfortably between people who didn't feel the need to fill it. Emily eventually broke it, crouching to let Bentley sniff a patch of dune grass. Can I ask you something? She said without looking up. Logan hesitated. Depends. Why do you come here every summer? You don't seem like the beach type. That caught him off guard. Most people asked about the house's design or complimented the view. Few noticed what was absent, the way Logan never seemed to unpack fully, or the untouched kayak on the porch that collected spiderwebs all season. It's quiet, he replied. So is a bunker. He glanced at her, but she wasn't mocking. Just observant, in that disarming way she had, the way that made it hard to lie, even by omission. My brother used to live up here, he said finally. Before the accident. I'm sorry. He shrugged. It was 5 years ago. Still hurts though. Logan didn't respond. Bentley stopped to sniff an old driftwood log, then laid beside it like he found a sacred place. Emily sat too, patting the spot beside her. Logan stayed standing. My dad used to say grief is a house guest, Emily said, picking up a piece of sea glass. It never really leaves. You just learn to let it walk through your kitchen without breaking things. Logan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. She handed him the glass. Take it. It's just trash. No, she said, soft but firm. It's something broken that got shaped into something smooth. That's different. He took the shard, light green, worn by the ocean, and held it between his fingers. It was warmer than he expected. That afternoon, he worked from the den while Emily and Bentley played in the yard. His eyes kept drifting from his laptop to the window, where she tossed a frisbee too gently for the retriever to chase at full speed. When she came in, cheeks flushed and windblown, she didn't ask about his work. She didn't care about quarterly earnings or expansion plans. Instead, she reached for the kettle like she'd always known where it was. You don't talk about your brother, she said as the water boiled. Most people don't ask. I'm not most people. He looked at her, really looked, and saw a kind of transparency he wasn't used to. There was no angle with Emily. No agenda. Just someone who saw things as they were, and didn't flinch. We were close, he said. Closer when we were kids. He was the dreamer. I was the cleanup crew. And after the accident? Logan swallowed. I got very good at cleaning up. Emily poured the tea, placed one mug in front of him. You ever let anyone help with that? No. You might try it sometime. By the end of the week, Bentley waited by the door before she arrived. Logan had stopped questioning it. Emily came and went like a tide, present, quiet, occasionally unexpected. She never pried. Never pushed. Just asked the kind of questions that left space for answers to grow. One evening, over dinner she'd cooked, something involving lentils and more flavor than Logan thought possible. She mentioned the shelter. They're under review, she said. The landowner passed away last year, and now the estate wants to sell. Developers are circling. Logan stiffened. What kind of developers? She shrugged. Big ones. Hotel chains, probably. Someone will tear it down, build a spa or a golf retreat. It's just, the dogs don't have anywhere else to go. He sipped his wine, said nothing. I know, she added quietly. Progress. Profits. All that. But I've seen what that place does. For the animals, and for the people who take them home. It matters. Logan looked away. His hands curled slightly at the edge of the table. Hey, she said, reaching over to tap his knuckles. Sorry. Didn't mean to get all activist on you. I know you're not the enemy. He didn't tell her the truth that night, that one of his own holding companies had received the proposal to acquire the property. That the plan to build a resort there had crossed his desk last spring. He didn't tell her because, for the first time in years, someone saw him as more than what he built. And he didn't know how to bear the cost of breaking that. The email arrived just after midnight, flagged, Urgent, by his assistant back in Manhattan. Logan tapped the message open on his tablet, the glow lighting his bedroom in sterile hues. Subject line, shelter site, initial demolition timeline and PR recommendations. He stared at it for a full minute before closing the screen. Downstairs, Bentley stirred and padded softly into the room, curling up beside the bed as he always did. Logan watched the dog breathe. 5 years ago, Bentley had been hours away from being put down in an overcrowded shelter. Ethan had missed Logan's call that night, the one where he planned to ask for help, maybe for the last time. Logan never got to leave that voicemail. Now someone else's shelter, someone else's call for help, was sitting in his inbox. And this time, he had the power to answer. The next morning, Emily arrived as always, wind-flushed and wrapped in a scarf that looked handmade, the kind of thing someone's grandmother would give them with quiet pride. "I have a question for you," she said, tugging the leash gently from Bentley's mouth. "And you can say no." He raised an eyebrow. "There's a fundraiser this weekend. For the shelter. We're doing a beach walk and silent auction. I know you don't do crowds, but..." He was already shaking his head. "Right. Got it. Never mind." But she wasn't hurt, just adjusting, like someone used to hearing no and moving forward anyway. He hated that. "Wait," he said. "What time?" The community center by the harbor was strung with handmade signs and paper lanterns. The fundraiser was modest: folding tables, donated snacks, a box labeled raffle prizes, scribbled in Sharpie. But there was something real about it. Something Logan couldn't define. Emily moved through the crowd like sunlight breaking through fog. She hugged people, crouched to talk to kids, laughed with an ease that made Logan ache. He stayed on the periphery, Bentley close to his leg, nodding at greetings and pretending to check his phone. He overheard enough to piece things together. The shelter had been on the edge for years. They ran on donations and goodwill, staffed mostly by volunteers like Emily. "This one's special," an older woman said beside him, gesturing toward a framed photograph in the auction line. It showed a pit bull curled protectively around a toddler. "Dog nearly lost her leg before the shelter took her in. Now she's a therapy animal." Logan nodded. "You thinking of bidding?" "No," he replied. "But someone should." He watched the photo for a moment longer before slipping a blank check under the frame. Later, on the porch of his house, Emily sat barefoot, legs tucked under her. "I saw what you did," she said. "The check. I didn't do it for you." "I know." She turned to him, eyes thoughtful. "But it makes me wonder something." "What's that?" "Why are you really here, Logan? Not just Maine. I mean this, letting me in. Letting anyone in." He looked out at the darkening horizon. The answer wasn't simple, and it certainly wasn't pretty. "Because you didn't ask for anything," he said eventually. "You didn't try to fix me." Emily's smile was sad and sweet all at once. "Maybe I just figured you weren't broken. Just hiding. I'm good at hiding." "I noticed." A pause. Then, "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Your brother." "All the time." She didn't say sorry. Didn't offer a platitude. She just sat beside him, close enough to touch, and let the silence speak. Bentley curled at their feet, the waves whispering secrets in the background. The next day, Logan called his lawyer. "I want to pull out of the deal," he said. There was a long silence on the other end. "Sir, the contracts are already in play. There are stakeholders. Find a way." Quietly. "The holding company can sell the parcel to a conservation trust. Or the town, if they'll take it. I'll cover the loss." "Understood. May I ask why?" Logan looked out the window, where Emily and Bentley were silhouetted against the rising sun, tossing sticks into the surf. "No," he said. "You may not." When the call ended, he stayed there, unmoving, while the morning unfolded in slow, deliberate hues. It felt like standing on the edge of something. Not ruin. Not rescue. Just choice. For the first time in years, he had no clear idea what came next. And for once, that didn't scare him. The following week passed with a rhythm that almost resembled peace. Logan handled meetings from the sunroom, Bluetooth in his ear, laptop on his knees, while Bentley dozed nearby. Emily came by each morning and left in the late afternoons, the dog always trailing her reluctantly when she stood to leave. They didn't talk about the shelter again. Not directly. But something in her posture softened around him, as if she could sense the gears shifting beneath his usual restraint. Logan found himself doing things he hadn't done in years, cooking something other than prepackaged meals, leaving his phone face down during dinner, listening to music that didn't feel like a background hum to productivity. At night, when he lay in bed, the silence didn't echo as harshly. It was still there, the grief, the shame, the guilt, but it no longer had the room entirely to itself. But peace, Logan knew, was temporary. Always. It arrived in the form of a news article. He wasn't looking for it. He hadn't typed his own name into a search bar in years. But someone at the local newspaper had gotten wind of the pending development deal for the animal shelter land. The headline was simple: Beloved Dog Shelter Faces Closure. Luxury Resort Planned for Site. Below it, a quote from the holding company overseeing the project. And beneath that, another name. His. It was buried in the fine print, but it was there. Logan Blake. Founder and CEO of Blake Hawthorne Properties. Parent company of the entity listed as buyer. He stared at the screen, pulse thudding in his ears. He had asked them to pull out. Quietly. He had made the call. But the paperwork had already been filed with the town 2 months ago. The process was public record. Now it had found its way to the surface. And Emily would see it. He didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, she arrived earlier than usual. Bentley bounded toward her as always, tail thumping. She patted him absently. Logan met her on the porch. "You knew," she said quietly. No preamble. No performance. Just the words laid bare. "I told them to back out." "But you didn't tell me." He didn't answer. Her arms were crossed now, not defensively, but to hold herself steady. "You sat there. At my fundraiser. You listened to people talk about the shelter like it meant something. And you didn't say a word. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. But it did." Logan exhaled slowly. "I bought that land before I met you. Months ago. It was just a site on a map. I didn't know who worked there. I didn't know about you." Emily looked away, jaw tight. "And when you did?" she asked. He stepped closer, but not too close. "I tried to fix it. Quietly. Without hurting you. But you didn't tell me," she repeated. "You made a choice to keep it from me. That's the part one don't understand. You act like honesty is some kind of luxury you can't afford." He wanted to tell her everything, about Ethan, about the phone call he never made, about the years spent turning grief into concrete and steel. Instead, he said the only thing that came. "I didn't know how." Silence. Bentley nudged Emily's hand gently. She scratched behind his ear with fingers that trembled just slightly. "I liked you better before I knew who you were," she said, voice low. And then she walked away, leash trailing, Bentley following hesitantly until Logan gave the faintest nod. As the sun dipped behind the coastal trees, Logan remained on the porch, still as stone. There were truths he hadn't said. And now, there might not be time to say them. Not to her. Not the way she deserved. The town was small enough that avoiding Emily wasn't just hard, it was impossible. Logan saw her once at the farmer's market, bent over a table of fresh tomatoes, her back rigid with awareness when she sensed him pass. Another time at the gas station, where she stood beside her aging Subaru, sunglasses hiding her expression, Bentley watching Logan through the back window with quiet confusion. But she never spoke. Never waved. Never stopped. The absence felt like an undoing. Logan had known relationships to fall apart, distant flings, polite breakups, a few months of something that never made it past surface. But this was different. This wasn't a breakup. This was a disconnection, a rewiring of how someone saw him. As if the shape of who he was had shifted in her eyes, and now he was unrecognizable. He deserved it. He knew that. Still, he kept checking the shelter's website. Kept clicking refresh on the donation page. Kept looking at the photo from the fundraiser, the one Emily had taken of Bentley, tongue out, grinning next to a hand-painted sign that read "Home is where the tail wags." He had already called off the deal. The holding company had officially withdrawn their offer. No press release, no fanfare. Just a legal backstep and a quiet forfeiture of profit. The land would stay where it was. The shelter would remain, for now. But Logan hadn't told her. Not because he didn't want to, but because it felt like saying it now would only serve himself. Like the gesture would be reduced to manipulation, not meaning. So he waited. And waited. Until he finally got tired of the sound of his own silence. It was the shelter's open house, a modest event meant to show off recent renovations, introduce volunteers, maybe get a few more dogs adopted before winter. Emily was there, of course. Talking to a young couple kneeling beside a skittish husky mix. Her voice was calm and confident, her smile a mask of professionalism so polished it almost looked natural. Logan stood by the doorway for a long minute before stepping inside. The change in her was subtle, a shift in posture, a quick glance that didn't linger. She finished speaking to the couple, gave the husky one last pat, then turned and walked past Logan like he was part of the decor. "Emily," he said. She stopped. Slowly turned. "There's something you should know," he said. "About the land." She said nothing, arms folded across her navy windbreaker. "The company withdrew. The deal's off. It won't be developed." A long pause. "I know," she said. He blinked. "You do?" She reached into her back pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "We got a copy of the release agreement last week. From the town office. You didn't say anything." "I didn't need to," she replied. "Because that's not the point." He tilted his head slightly. "Then what is?" She looked at him for the first time in days, really looked. "The point isn't that you changed the decision. It's that you made it in the first place. That you thought I couldn't handle the truth. I was trying to protect you." "No," she said. "You were protecting yourself. From being the villain in someone's story." He opened his mouth. Closed it. For once, words failed him. Emily continued, her voice quieter now. "You do this thing where you control everything, people, outcomes, emotions. You wrap it all in logic and say it's about efficiency, or professionalism, or protecting what matters." She took a step closer. "But sometimes what matters isn't the result. It's being brave enough to show someone the whole mess. Even when it's ugly." Bentley wandered into the room just then, nose twitching, tail swaying gently. "He still waits for you," she said. "At the porch. Every evening." Logan felt something crack inside him, not violently, but deeply, like the slow splitting of old wood under pressure. "I miss you," he said simply. Emily nodded. "I know. But I don't expect anything." "I know that too." She moved past him again, toward the kennels. And this time, before she disappeared, she said quietly over her shoulder, "I'm not angry anymore. But I'm still not sure if I trust you." Logan stood there a long while after she left the room, surrounded by the faint smells of bleach and dog shampoo and the sound of paws on concrete floors. Maybe this was what healing looked like, not a dramatic apology, not a grand gesture, but the slow rebuild of something that might one day be whole again. Or might not. Bentley sat beside him, leaning gently into his side. And for now, that was enough. Autumn crept in with quiet persistence. The trees along the coast began their slow burn, crimson and rust bleeding through the green like memory through a dream. The ocean, once gentle, grew moodier, carving sharper lines in the sand as though rewriting the shoreline itself. Logan stayed in Maine longer than planned. His assistant had called twice, hinting about shareholder meetings and a new acquisition in Seattle. He answered neither. Instead, he found himself moving through his days like someone learning to live in a different rhythm. Mornings began with coffee and the sound of Bentley's nails tapping the hardwood, He no longer worked from the den, but from the porch, wrapped in sweaters and silence. He wrote fewer emails, spoke in shorter sentences. And sometimes, he thought about Ethan. Not the tragic ending, but the years before: bike races down summer hills, shared jokes about their parents' rigid rules, the way Ethan used to call him, General Blake, every time Logan insisted on order and discipline. He remembered Ethan's last voicemail, saved but never replayed. 1 minute and 10 seconds long. Logan still hadn't listened. Not yet. But he opened the file. Let it sit there on the screen. A promise that he was at least thinking about facing it. One Tuesday morning, the doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. Bentley barked once, then wagged toward the door. Emily stood on the other side, holding a leash, but not Bentley's. A lean, three-legged terrier stared up at Logan, head tilted with almost comic suspicion. "I need a favor," she said. He stepped aside without a word. The dog limped into the foyer, sniffed the corner of the rug, and promptly peed on it. Emily winced. "He's not great with transitions." Logan handed her a paper towel wordlessly. "They're renovating the kennel wing," she said, crouching to blot the mess. "And the foster home this guy was headed to fell through. He doesn't do well in the shelter. Gets cage aggressive. So I thought maybe here." Logan raised an eyebrow. "You trust me with the dog again?" "I trust Bentley," she said, glancing toward where he now lay, nose touching the terrier's paw. "And you didn't bring him back because?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd say yes without him." He didn't answer. But he didn't say no. She stood. Dusted her hands. "His name's Kip." "Kip," Logan repeated, as the dog sneezed dramatically. "He's kind of a mess," she said. "I'm used to messes." Emily nodded. "I'll check in. But if it's too much..." "It's not." She hesitated in the doorway. "I didn't come to fix anything. I just came because he needed somewhere steady for a while." "Steady," Logan said. "Right." She left before he could add more. Bentley followed her to the porch, then returned on his own, Kip now dragging a chew toy twice his size into the living room. Logan stood there, watching the two dogs settle near each other, not quite touching, but close. Like they'd made a silent agreement to coexist. Like they understood what it meant to carry invisible weight. Over the next few days, Kip adjusted. He was skittish, prone to barking at ceiling fans and his own reflection, but gradually began to shadow Bentley the way Bentley once shadowed Logan. And Logan, in turn, began to notice the texture of the days more keenly. How the light changed in the late afternoon. How quiet the house had become, and how different that quiet felt now that it wasn't empty. One evening, he found himself walking the beach again. Kip limped beside him, unbothered by the sand. Bentley trotted ahead, occasionally circling back with a glance that seemed to say, "Still with me?" At a bend in the trail, Logan stopped. The bench where he'd first met Emily still stood, weathered but solid. He sat down. Took out his phone. Opened the voicemail. Ethan's voice poured into his ear, warm and a little hoarse. "Hey, Logan. Listen, I know you're busy. Always are. But I was thinking about something dumb today. That time we biked off the dock at Mom's lake house. I was so sure we were going to fly. You always said I never looked before I leapt. I guess that's true." A pause. Breath. "Anyway, I miss you. You should come up this weekend. There's a band playing at the marina. Bring Bentley. Yeah, I heard you got a dog. Kinda shocked me, man. You don't usually go for the mess." Logan closed his eyes. "I don't know. Maybe it's good. Maybe you're finally learning to let something in." Another breath. Then static. End of message. Logan sat there long after the waves had blurred the prints in the sand. He didn't cry. Not exactly. But something inside him loosened, a tension he'd carried so long it had become indistinguishable from identity. Kip leaned against his leg. Bentley sat at his feet. And for the first time in years, Logan looked at the path ahead and didn't feel the need to walk it alone. October softened into November with a hush. The tourist crowd had thinned entirely. Cafes switched to winter hours, and the town began hanging early wreaths in the windows, as though bracing for the chill not just in weather but in spirit. In Logan's home, the days ticked by quieter, though no longer empty. Kip had claimed the guest room, or rather, a tangle of old blankets beside the radiator, as his sanctuary. Bentley gave him space but occasionally nudged him toward the door when it was time for walks. Logan, without quite meaning to, found a rhythm around them both: morning strolls, quiet meals, work emails reduced to short bursts that no longer consumed entire evenings. He still hadn't heard from Emily. But she was present in small ways. A bag of dog food left on his porch. A scribbled note with a vet appointment reminder. Once, a Polaroid of Kip curled beside Bentley, fast asleep. On the back, she'd written, "Proof that miracles happen." Slowly. It made him smile. Not the strained public smile of a man used to hosting investors, but a real one, the kind that reached the eyes, though no one was there to see it. One Friday morning, the mail brought a letter, handwritten, no return address. He recognized her cursive before he opened it. "Logan, I've been thinking about something. About second chances. They're not clean. They don't come gift-wrapped or with guarantees. Sometimes they don't even come from the person who hurt you. They come from the part of you that wants to believe people can be more than the worst thing they did. You pulled out of the deal. That mattered. But more than that, you stayed. You didn't run back to the city. You let the silence sit between us and didn't try to fill it with excuses. I'm not saying I'm ready. Or that I know what this is, whatever's still between us. But if you're still here next week, Kip and I are doing the town's Thanksgiving walk. Nothing formal. Just a group of us, a few dogs, some donated pies. 9 a.m., at the South Trailhead. If you want to come, come. If not, I still hope you're okay. Emily." He read it twice. Then tucked it into the side drawer of his desk, next to the voicemail recording. That Sunday, he woke before dawn, brewed coffee, and watched Bentley watching him. "You knew she'd come around," he muttered. Bentley didn't respond. But he wagged once. Slowly. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and bright, the sky a sharp, endless blue. Logan dressed in layers, pulling on gloves and a knit cap someone had once left in his hotel's lost and found, and never claimed. He almost turned back twice. But Kip was already waiting by the door. Bentley too. The trailhead wasn't far. He could see the gathering from the ridge, a cluster of locals, bundled in mismatched coats, dogs bounding and barking, kids carrying thermoses of cider. Someone had brought a portable speaker playing quiet jazz. And there, near the edge of the crowd, was Emily. She was laughing at something an older man had said. Hair pulled back, scarf too long, cheeks red from the wind. Kip saw her first, and whined low in his throat. Bentley trotted ahead. Logan followed. She turned as he approached, and for the briefest moment, her expression shifted, not surprise exactly, but something softer. Like a door left open, just a crack. "Hey," he said. "Hey." They stood there, awkward and still. "Thought you might show up," she added, crouching to scratch Kip's ears. "I wasn't sure I would," Logan admitted. "Then I'm glad you did." A pause. Then, "You doing okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Getting there." "Good. That's all any of us can do." Someone called her name from the trailhead. She waved. Turned back to him. "Want to walk?" she asked, almost casual. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I do." They didn't speak for the first mile. Just walked, the dogs weaving between them, the forest alive with frost and distant birdsong. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full of something unnamed. Logan glanced at her once, catching the way the light caught on the curve of her smile as she watched the dogs. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something close. A beginning, maybe? Or maybe, just maybe, the continuation of something that had never fully ended. The days after the walk blurred into a soft rhythm. Emily didn't call. Logan didn't write. But somehow, they saw each other almost every day. Sometimes it was deliberate. She'd stop by the house to pick up Kip or drop off borrowed books she claimed she didn't need anymore. Other times, it felt accidental. Like fate had given up subtlety. They crossed paths at the local co-op. At the hardware store. Once, at the beach just before dusk, where Bentley and Kip had raced each other along the surf, and neither of them said much, just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching the dogs lose themselves in the motion. There were still things unsaid. A canyon of them. But the silence no longer bristled. It held space for something else, maybe understanding. Maybe just the willingness to try again without rewriting the past. Logan found himself thinking less about Ethan in the way he used to, the guilt, the weight. Now, the memories came gentler. A shared song in the car. A joke only they would have gotten. Ethan had been the heart of things, and maybe that's why losing him had hollowed everything out. But Bentley had filled some of that void. Kip, too. And now Emily, well, she was something else. Not a replacement. Not a redemption. Just a reminder that the world still held warmth, if you were willing to feel it. In early December, Emily invited him over for dinner. No pretense. No holiday decorations. Just a one-line text, "I'm making soup. Come eat." He showed up 5 minutes late with a bottle of wine he wasn't sure paired with soup. She was in socks and an oversized sweater, hair pinned up. Kip sprawled in front of the fireplace like he owned the house. "Smells good," Logan said. "It's lentil," she replied, stirring a pot. "Not exciting. But warm. I like warm." She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. They ate at her small kitchen table, elbows nearly touching. The conversation drifted easily. The shelter's next fundraiser, a dog with 2 different colored eyes that kept escaping its kennel, a book Emily was reading and couldn't quite finish. At one point, she stood to get more bread and caught him looking at her. Not in a way that lingered too long, but with something unspoken behind the eyes. "You're different now," she said, not unkindly. He didn't argue. Just asked, "Better or worse?" She thought for a moment. "Less guarded. Still kind of a control freak." He smiled faintly. "That might never change." "I know." She poured more wine, set the bottle between them. "Why did you stay?" she asked, almost too softly. Logan looked down. "Because leaving felt like proof I hadn't learned anything." Emily nodded. "And now?" "No," he said, meeting her gaze. "I'm still figuring that out. But I'm not going anywhere." Something shifted in her eyes, not melting, not softening entirely, but the first signs of thaw. She took a sip of wine, then leaned back. "I never needed you to fix anything, Logan. I know. I just needed you to show up." He let the words settle. Let them live in the room without rushing to respond. And that was the difference. Later, they sat on the floor beside the fire, Bentley curled on one side, Kip snoring softly on the other. Emily rested her head on the couch behind her, eyes half closed. "Do you ever think about going back?" she asked. "To New York?" "I used to," he said. "Every day." "And now?" He was quiet a long moment. "There's nothing there I want more than this." She nodded, not looking at him. Outside, snow began to fall, slow, soundless, like the sky was exhaling. Logan didn't reach for her hand. Didn't push for closeness. But when she leaned slightly into his shoulder, he stayed still. And when she didn't pull away, he let the moment last. It started with a phone call. Not dramatic, not urgent, just a familiar voice on Logan's voicemail, his assistant from New York. "Thought you should know," she said lightly. "One of the business blogs is doing a piece on Blake Hawthorne's shift away from the main development. Some local angle, shelter politics. Could be nothing. Could pick up steam." Logan stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, sunlight filtering through the window as Kip nosed at Bentley's tail, trying to instigate a chase. But the moment settled with weight. He hadn't told Emily everything. She knew the deal had been pulled. She knew he'd stayed. What she didn't know, not yet, was that the initial push to buy the shelter property had come from him directly. That he'd been the one to greenlight the proposal, months before ever walking the shore where Bentley had met her. He'd buried that detail. Not out of malice, but shame. At first it had seemed irrelevant. Then, it had felt unforgivable. Now, it just felt inevitable. He found her at the shelter that afternoon. She was mopping the front entrance, earbuds in, humming something low and tuneless. The whole place smelled like pine cleaner and wet dog. She looked up, surprised. Smiled. "Hey! We need to talk." The smile faded. "Okay." He didn't soften it. Didn't try to cushion the blow. "The shelter deal? I approved the acquisition. Personally. It wasn't some rogue investor. It was me. I bought the land months before I met you." Silence. "I didn't know the shelter was there," he added quickly. "It was just property. But I saw the plans. I signed off. And I didn't tell you because," he faltered, "because I knew it would change things." Emily stood still. Mop still upright in her hand, water trailing quietly onto the tile. "You bought the land?" "Yes." "And then stood there at the fundraiser like you were some innocent bystander?" "I wasn't innocent. I know that. Logan." Her voice cracked once. "You stood next to me and watched me fight for that place. Knowing you were the reason it was in danger." He nodded. "I did." She set the mop down slowly. Leaned against the wall like the room had lost its gravity. "I can't do this," she said after a long pause. "I know. No. I don't think you do." She met his eyes, and they were unreadable. "You made a decision to keep the truth from me. And then another. And another. And each one told me a little more about what you thought I could handle. Or what you thought I was worth. That's not it. I believed in you," she said. "That's what makes this worse." Logan felt the floor sway slightly beneath him, not from motion, but from realization. "You said once that you didn't need me to fix anything," he said. "That you just needed me to show up. I did. I do. I'm still here." She looked down. "I know. But I don't know what that means anymore." The days that followed were gray. He didn't see her. Didn't text. She didn't call. Kip sulked by the door for the first day, then resumed his lazy orbit of the house. Bentley seemed unsettled, watching the road from the front porch, ears pricked at every passing car. Logan worked. A little. He made calls. Read contracts. But the energy that once came so easily, the hunger that had built his empire, now felt hollow, like muscle memory in a body that no longer believed in the motion. He missed her. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way. But in the way of noticing a space beside you that used to be full, of laughter, of quiet, of something unspoken that now had no name. He thought about leaving. He thought about staying. He thought about all the things he'd been too late for. And then, one morning, he stood up from his desk, pulled on a coat, and drove to the town's printing shop. The letter arrived at the shelter 3 days later. It wasn't signed. Just a single sheet of heavy paper. To whom it may concern. Enclosed is a deed of donation for Parcel 11B along the coastal preserve, including the shelter land and surrounding acreage. Ownership has been transferred to the local land trust under irrevocable conservation status. It can never be developed. Consider it returned to those who understand what it means to protect something fragile. No conditions. No credits. Emily read it twice. Then again. And then she folded it slowly, hands trembling, and placed it on her desk. Bentley had come with her that day, a silent messenger, and now sat at the office door, tail still, gaze watchful. She crouched beside him. Buried her face in his neck. "I don't know if it's enough," she whispered. Bentley said nothing. But he leaned into her. And for now, that was enough. Snow had started to fall again, not the dramatic kind that coated roads and shuttered towns, but the delicate, drifting kind that came in silence and stayed where it landed. The town was winding down for winter, shutters drawn, lights dimmed early. And Logan, for once, was still. He hadn't heard from Emily in over a week. The donation had gone through. His lawyer confirmed it. The land now belonged, permanently, to the land trust. The shelter would never be sold, never see concrete poured over the memory of paw prints and patient, trembling animals. There'd been no press release. No ceremony. Just a quiet transaction, a gesture of repair, not reward. Bentley sat at the door most evenings now, watching the road the way Logan used to watch stock prices, expectant, unblinking, waiting for something that might never arrive. Logan didn't talk much, not even to the dogs. He cooked when he remembered. Walked the beach when the tide was low. Some part of him hoped, foolishly, maybe, that Emily would simply appear again. Not with absolution. Just with her presence. The kind that didn't ask for performance. The kind that came without armor. But she didn't come. Not until Christmas Eve. He was chopping wood when he saw her car pull into the drive, headlights cutting a soft path through the gray. She stepped out wearing a coat too thin for the weather, hat pulled low, Kip leashed and trotting at her side like a ghost come home. Logan didn't move at first. Just watched her. And when she spoke, it wasn't with ceremony. No preamble. "I came to say thank you." He set the axe down slowly. "You didn't have to." "I know." She shifted, eyes not quite meeting his. "But I wanted to." A pause. Kip sniffed around the porch, then found Bentley waiting at the threshold, tail thumping like it had never stopped. Emily exhaled. "I was angry. Not just at what you did, but at what it made me remember. All the times I'd believed someone and been wrong." Logan nodded, waiting. "You didn't lie outright," she continued. "But you chose silence. And sometimes silence is just a more polite kind of betrayal." "I know. But the shelter, you didn't have to do that. And you did." She looked at him fully now. "That matters." He wanted to say 100 things. That he still thought about her every morning. That the porch felt too quiet without her mug clinking against his. That he'd been wrong, not once, but in layers, and still didn't expect her to forgive all of it. Instead, he said, "It wasn't about redemption." "I know," she said. They stood there for a moment, not quite close, not quite apart. Then Emily stepped up onto the porch. Bentley whined and leaned against her, Kip curling at her feet. She looked around. "You've been chopping wood. It's quiet work." She smiled, just a little. "You're still learning how to stay still. Some days I get it right. And the others? I wait." A breeze lifted her hair from her face. She looked different now, not softer, but steadier. Like someone who'd learned that forgiveness wasn't a gift you gave all at once, but something you offered in pieces, if the other person was still willing to hold them. She walked past him, into the house. "Come in," she said. Not a question. Not a promise. An invitation. Logan followed. That night they ate quietly. Soup again. Same old mugs. A little salter than he liked, but he didn't mention it. She noticed anyway, rolled her eyes, handed him the pepper. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't define the future. When she reached for his hand across the table, fingers just resting lightly on his, he let his own settle over hers without fanfare. And that was it. No dramatic vows. No declarations. Just two people sitting at a worn wooden table, the fire behind them crackling low, the dogs asleep at their feet, the snow drifting silently past the windows. They had lost things, siblings, trust, the versions of themselves they once thought were enough. But now they had this, the present moment, the shared breath, the decision to begin again. And sometimes, Logan knew, that was all that mattered. Sometimes, that was everything.